Let's now go to our final speaker of the day, Lauren from Collins Aerospace. Lauren has kindly offered to talk about their project, and it's interesting because unlike some of the other speakers we've had today, Collins is really at the start of their journey with Ubisense, using a combination of our smart space software and RFID tracking. I'm looking forward to hearing about the project they're embarking on at both their sites in Germany and the US, and what kind of advice they would give to other organizations starting out on their own real-time location project.
Hello, it's good to be here with you today. As you saw, my name is Lauren DiBlasi, and I'm the Digital Operations and Continuous Improvement Manager at the Hamburg location for Collins Aerospace. At our location, we work exclusively on the A320neo. It's a mid-size commercial Airbus. And what we do is we install the engine buildup, which is about 500 smaller to mid-size parts onto the engine, which then allows it to be attached to and hooked up to the airplane. And we also go ahead and paint the nacelle components, which are the large components around the engine. So if you're not familiar with aerospace manufacturing, I always say the nacelle is what you see on the engine. So when you're on your vacation, in the aircraft looking at the engine, you're actually looking at the nacelle. You're not seeing much of the engine at all because that's what's inside. So my position is pretty fun, I think, because I get to work on bringing digitalization projects to the site. For a few years now, we've been talking about an RFID solution at Collins Aerospace, and we piloted a small project at another facility. And one of the lessons learned from that pilot was that we really want a solution that's going to be integrated with SAP. SAP is our system of record at the site. It's for finance, for inventory, for everything. And we've been using it for decades. And we really want a inventory management solution to be connected to it. So when they launched this project of a second pilot with a solution that was integrated to SAP, we were really lucky in Hamburg because they decided to choose Hamburg as the site for that project. And so since then, I've been trying my best to learn about RFID technology, and so is the site. And luckily, we've had Ubisense with us to patiently explain to us the technology we really knew nothing about from the beginning. But our use case is pretty simple, in fact. Like I mentioned, we have a global supply chain. Most of those major components, those big nacelle components, are coming from another factory of ours in the US, and they're being shipped over to us where we paint them. The smaller components for the engines are coming from a variety of suppliers across the world. So all of these things are coming to us at our third-party logistics company. And so there, it's an offsite warehouse where they will do the customs clearance, they perform the receiving in SAP, they perform the storage, and ultimately what they're doing, especially with those engine parts, is they're kitting them. So those 500 parts go into these individual shadow boards. So one kit can be delivered to our facility just in time for the build, and the operator has exactly what they need for that one unit that they're building. So when we started the project, we were thinking about some of the most important requirements we had for the RFID technology. And one of the main ones was to improve our ability to identify large parts. So those big nacelle components arrive to us in some pretty large boxes, and we're able to stack them, two on top of one another. So when you're standing on the ground and you're looking up at these two components, it's basically the size of a two-story building. And if you want to know what's inside the component on the top, the serial number and all the information about that, you're largely dependent on what paper signage might have been attached to it and how it was positioned against the wall, if you can even see that signage. So we wanted the ability to be able to scan that box and know which serial number it is and which component it is exactly. The other thing we wanted was to automate some of the SAP inventory movements. So today, our process is largely manual for SAP inventory movements. And to be honest, we have some wireless devices, but the users and the material handlers don't like using the interface so much. It's not very user-friendly. And they actually prefer to go to their desk in most cases to transact the SAP movement on the computer. So we really wanted a user-friendly interface or an automated interface that was going to allow us to align the physical movement with the SAP movement. So we're getting more accurate data. Besides the fact that automating the inventory movement is just eliminating an entire section of waste in the business. The third thing we wanted to do was to be able to track the parts that were in transit from our 3PL to our site. Because our 3PL is located off-site, we didn't have a good way of knowing what had left their facility and what was on its way to our facility. And while we do have, tacted logistics and things like that in place, there's always ad hoc requests, and it's always good to be sure and be able to manage and monitor where your parts are in transit. And lastly, we really wanted a solution that was going to help us with our inventory management. We have the requirement to double check our inventory and therefore count all of the parts we have at least once a year. So we divide that up into monthly buckets of counting parts and validating inventory. And you can imagine when you have, a box of parts that might be 500 bolts, you're very subject to human error. And we really wanted a way that RFID could help us to possibly scan the bins and scan the tags and tell us digitally how much was there rather than relying on a human to count every single part. So really quickly, I'm just going to walk through, like Stephen said, we're in the process of development, so I don't really have anything to show you that's been deployed yet. We're still in the process of installing the hardware and things like that. But the general flow of material will be through the 3PL warehouse, where it goes to a receiving area. We're installing a RFID table reader, so the user can unpack the goods, perform the goods receipt in SAP automatically with the RFID label printing. When they attach that label, they will then be able to store it into the supermarket. And we had Ubisense design a better HMI, so a handheld interface that's more user-friendly, where the operator can take it with them into the supermarket, and it will organize their route through the supermarket to make a more optimal way of taking the parts from receiving and storing them into the supermarket, along with also pushing the transaction to SAP, where now the part is actually on the shelf. We've also designed another HMI, which helps with the kitting process. So the user will go into the supermarket aisle with their handheld and be able to know where to select the parts they need to kit the different shadow boards. And as they're picking up the parts and putting them into the shadow board, they're able to issue those parts directly to the production order. From the SmartSpace HMI, they can also store that production order when the kit is complete, and it automatically performs the SAP stocking movement. So finally, when everything's been kitted, when everything's ready to be delivered to our site, the users can take the parts from the various areas, and they'll go through an RFID gate at the outgoing door, and that will trigger an alert that these parts are now in transit and on their way to our facility. Once they come to our facility, they go temporarily to our logistics warehouse where we have a Kanban in place. We are installing an RFID gate there to basically end the in-transit status of the parts. Now they're received at our facility. We no longer have to have those forklift operators and material handlers going to their desk to make the inventory movement in SAP. It'll be done automatically once it goes through the gates. And then finally, when the parts are ready to be delivered to production, they'll go straight to the production floor and go through another set of gates where they will then be taken out of inventory in SAP and issued to the next assembly WIP. So we installed a lot of gates here to help with that automated movement of material while still using SAP as our system of record. And I wanted to give some key lessons learned from our development process, because we did learn a lot. You know, we developed this solution from nothing into what you just saw today. And I think the biggest takeaway is details. There were many cases where, we didn't think something was super relevant, or we didn't go far enough into the details on something, and then it came back at us later, where we had to go back and rethink. So I think some of the ways that we could have avoided missing some of those details was first to, empower the people. So we had, a huge team from people in the US to France and Germany helping on this project. But at the end of the day, the project is intended to help the material handlers, and it's supposed to make their lives easier. And so including them in the project really made a difference, because they're the ones who are actually doing the work and they know what's going to be helpful. So encouraging them to speak up and participate in the development meetings was a big benefit. And we had a lot of aha moments whenever we included them. Another thing was, unfortunately, for our project, it just got kicked off during the start of COVID. So we had to be very creative with Zoom, and being visual was a big benefit for us. In a lot of cases, our meetings involved, 30 people. And so keeping 30 people engaged on a weekly meeting is a real challenge. So having visuals that are tracking the right things, able to convey the right things during those Zoom meetings makes it much easier. Also, our team was very international, and so visuals just at the end of the day can be much easier to understand when, maybe you're even balancing lots of different projects, you're thinking in different languages in your head than what you're speaking. So visuals can be so much easier to convey the message. And the last thing was just to be thorough, like I sort of alluded to earlier, documenting all of the processes, including the exception cases, and mapping them out is really a lesson learned for us, because there were some cases where we thought, that's an exception to our main process. And so we're not going to think about that right now. We'll take care of that later. But, at the end of the day, it would have been easier to take care of it at the beginning, because maybe, we found out that it was not as much of an exception as I thought, and it's actually occurring more than I originally anticipated. So looking at all of your processes and developing a solution for all of your processes is definitely recommended, along with not making any assumptions. Everybody on the team was coming from a different area. Maybe we never met each other. A lot of people had never even visited the Hamburg facility. Maybe they never even knew what an nacelle was, because we were working with a lot of people from the IT department too. So just not making any assumptions about what people know about the process, what they know about the product, really, really helps, to be sure that we get the details through to everybody, and everybody is understanding what we're doing. So with that, I wish anyone success on their journey as they develop a solution for RFID or with Ubisense.
Great. Thanks very much, Lauren. You talked at the start about this being a fun project. I suspect it's also pretty frantic as well. So thanks for taking the time to share with us today. I just want to pick up on a thought you left us with at the end there. You talked about being inclusive, getting people involved, and being able to generate those aha moments when people, speak up and contribute something as part of the team. Do you have any examples of the type of thing that came out of those sessions?
Yeah, definitely. We had conducted one site survey, which was late at night and didn't really involve the logistics team too much. And so it led us to originally assume that we needed a RFID table reader in the kitting area, because we thought that all of the pickers were going through the supermarket, picking the parts, and then bringing them to the area to put them in the shadow board. So we had gone forward assuming we needed this kitting table. But then during our second site survey, where we included a lot more of the logistics team members, we realized, oh, wait, they are actually doing the kitting and the shadow boards directly in the supermarket. And we don't need this kitting table at all. In fact, they wouldn't use it if we installed it. So it was really good to have known that and corrected before we went ahead with the design. And now we developed an HMI in the handheld units that can help with the pickers.
That's great. So what you think is a process isn't necessarily what the process is. These things have a life of their own, I guess, and evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Lauren.